You know, I've been thinking about something that has been bothering me for quite some time now. There is this narrative going around the story that has captured everyone's imagination about the greatest wealth transfer in American history, $124 trillion. They say from the baby boomers to the millennials and Gen Z. The media loves this story. Financial planners are building entire practices around it, and 47 million American families are sitting there, waiting, believing their lives are about to change forever. Let me tell you something. They wrong, and I've lived long enough to see this pattern play out multiple times across multiple civilizations, and it never ends the way people think it is going to end. I've seen a tremendous amount of inflation in my lifetime. I remember when a hamburger cost 5 cents and the minimum wage was 40 cents an hour. Did that inflation ruin the investment climate? I don't think it did. But here is what I learned watching all of that unfold. Inflation is a transfer mechanism. It is a way of moving wealth from one group of people to another. And most people don't see it happening until it is too late. Let me walk you through something that historians have documented over and over again, but that modern people seem to have completely forgotten. There is a 4-stage pattern that has destroyed the middle class of every major civilization that has ever existed. Rome, Weimar Germany. And now, I believe, the United States. The pattern is so mathematically precise that once you understand it, you can watch it unfold in real time. Stage 1 is the foundation. A nation establishes a currency backed by something real, gold, silver, something with actual value. This creates trust, it creates economic expansion, and it creates the illusion that it'll last forever. That is the key word there, illusion. I remember studying Rome when I was young. Under Augustus, the denarius contained 95% pure silver. That was a real currency. People trusted it. The Roman economy expanded. But then came stage 2, expansion and debasement. You see, governments always face mounting costs. Wars, welfare programs, imperial overreach. The Roman emperors needed money desperately. Nero needed it after the fire of Rome in 64 AD. So what did he do? He reduced the silver content from 95% to 80%. Just a little bit. Nobody will notice. They thought that is how it always starts. By the time you get to Septimius Severus 130 years later, that same coin contained just 46% silver. Then came Caracalla in 215 AD, introducing the Antoninianus, supposedly worth 2 denarii, but containing only 1.5 times the silver. That is monetary fraud on a civilizational scale. By 253 AD, the Antoninianus contained 20% silver. A decade after that, 2% silver, in what was once the most trusted currency on earth. And what happened? Prices exploded by 1,000%. Small landholders lost everything. The wealthy who held land and gold, they consolidated power. The Roman middle class was annihilated. Now, I want to be clear about something I've never been able to predict accurately. I don't make money predicting accurately. We just tend to get into good businesses and stay there. But recognizing patterns, that is different. That is not prediction. That is observation. And here is what I observe. Stage 3 is loss of control. The currency collapses. Inflation accelerates. And here is the critical part. The middle class holding their wealth in that debased currency gets obliterated. Meanwhile, those closest to money creation, the elites, the landowners, the politically connected, they survive, they consolidate. Let me give you a more recent example, one that happened in my lifetime, Weimar Germany, 1920, 1 to 1923. After World War I, Germany owed 132 billion gold marks in reparations. That is over $500 billion today. Germany had abandoned the gold standard during the war. They lost. Now they had to pay in gold, backed currency while possessing almost none. The Weimar government made a choice. Instead of raising taxes or cutting spending, they printed money. And watch how fast this accelerates. By mid-1922, the exchange rate hit 320 marks per dollar. 6 months later, 7,400 marks per dollar. By November 1923, $1 equals 4.2 trillion marks. 4.2 trillion. A loaf of bread that cost 160 marks at the end of 1922 now costs 200 billion marks. Families who saved for generations watched their entire fortunes evaporate in months. Anyone holding cash was destroyed. Anyone holding land, gold, or foreign currency. They survived. The wealth of millions transferred to a tiny elite in less than 2 years. I think that one should recognize reality even when one does tea like it. Indeed, especially when one doesn't tea like it. And the reality is this pattern repeats. It is not a coincidence. Now let me tell you about something I lived through personally. August 15th, 1971. I was 47 years old, already successful, already managing significant capital. President Nixon stood before America and suspended dollar convertibility into gold. The Nixon shock, they called it. For 27 years, since Bretton Woods in 1944, the dollar had been pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. Every other currency was pegged to the dollar. That was the foundation of the global financial system. But by 1971, America was hemorrhaging gold. Foreign governments demanded redemption. The U.S. had only 10,000 metric tons left, less than half its peak reserves. On August 11, 1970, Britain alone requested $3 billion in gold moved from Fort Knox. Nixon had no choice. He closed the gold window. The dollar became fiat currency overnight. What happened next? Inflation. The 1970s delivered stagflation. If you, like me, lived through 73, 74, or even the early 90s, there was a waiting list to get out of the country club. That is when you know things are tough. Those holding dollars watched purchasing power evaporate. Those holding assets, real estate, gold equities. They flourished. The wealth gap began widening systematically. Stage 4 is the reset. A new currency is introduced, or the existing one is reformed. Wealth has transferred from millions to a few thousand. The system restarts, and the people never see it coming. Which brings me to today, to that $124 trillion wealth transfer everyone is talking about. Here is what you need to understand. As of 2024, the top 1% of Americans hold 30.8% of all wealth, $49.2 trillion. The bottom 50%, they hold 2.8%. Total U.S. household wealth stands at $163 trillion, the highest in history, inflated by surging stock and real estate prices. But here is the part that destroys the narrative. Of that $124 trillion transfer, $62 trillion comes from the wealthiest 2% of households alone. And where is it going? Right back to the top. Millennials and Gen Z expect to inherit $46 trillion and $15 trillion respectively. But Northwestern Mutual S2020 study reveals that only 26% of Americans actually plan to leave an inheritance. 1/3 of millennials expect one. Only 22% of boomers and Gen X plan to leave anything. The expectation gap is massive. Millions are banking on money that doesn't exist. Meanwhile, the median inheritance for the bottom 90% of Americans, close to zero. The wealth transfer is a myth for ordinary people. It is a consolidation for the elite, and it is happening because of the exact same pattern I've been describing. Let me be very direct about something. I think democracies are prone to inflation because politicians will naturally spend. They have the power to print money and will use money to get votes. That is not a moral judgment. That is just reality. And when you combine that political incentive with 50+ years of fiat currency expansion since Nixon closed the gold window, you get exactly what we're seeing now. The national debt exceeds $36 trillion. The Federal Reserve has expanded the money supply exponentially. Real wages have stagnated for decades. The top 1% now controls wealth equivalent to the bottom 90% combined. Housing is unaffordable. The middle class is being hollowed out. This is stage 3 playing out right in front of your eyes. Now, I can already hear what you are thinking, Charlie. This time is different. America is exceptional. We have technology, innovation, resilience. You know what? That is what they said in Rome. That is what they said in Weimar Germany. That is what every civilization says right before the pattern completes itself. But the pattern does care about exceptionalism. It does care about your innovation. It cares about mathematics. It cares about the immutable reality that when you debase a currency, you destroy the savers and reward the asset holders every single time. No exceptions in 2,000 years. I've said many times that knowing what you don't know is more useful than being brilliant, and acknowledging what you don't know is the dawning of wisdom. So let me be clear about what I don't know. I don't know exactly when this pattern will complete. I don't know exactly what form the reset will take. I don't know if it'll be a new currency, a digital dollar, some form of central bank digital currency, or something else entirely. But here is what I do know. If you are holding your wealth in cash, in savings accounts, in fixed income instruments, you are on the wrong side of history. The pattern shows with absolute clarity that currency debasement always transfers wealth from those holding the currency to those holding real assets. Land, equities, commodities, things that cannot be printed into existence. Over the very long term, history shows that the chances of any business surviving in a manner agreeable to a company's owners are slim at best, but businesses as a class, ownership of productive assets as a class, have always outperformed currency during debasement cycles. Always. Let me give you a concrete example from my own experience. Thanks to the early 1930s and the behavior of the capitalists in the robber baron days, stocks yielded dividends that were twice as much as the interest rates on bonds. It was a wonderful period to be buying stocks. We profited from others, demoralization from the previous generation. That is what happens in these cycles. The people who understand the pattern, who recognize that currency debasement is a transfer mechanism, they position themselves on the right side, and the people who don't, they fund everyone else's wealth. When Warren and I bought CS Candies in 1972 for $25 million, we discovered something remarkable. We could raise prices 10% a year, and nobody cared. That taught us about the power of owning real assets, productive businesses with pricing power during inflationary periods over time. From 1972 through 2007, CS went from making $4 million in pre-tax earnings to over $80 million. That is a real business generating real cash flow, insulated from currency debasement, because it owned something people actually wanted and would pay for regardless of what happened to the dollar. Conservative investing and steady saving without expecting miracles is the way to go. Some people in this room can figure out how to average twice the rate of return. I can teach everyone else to do it. It is pretty difficult, but what I can teach you is pattern recognition. I can teach you to look at history and see that this has happened before and will happen again. You don't ever want to do anything to push an economy to collapse. Terrible things result. I lived through the aftermath of the Great Depression. I saw what happened when the financial system broke down. I saw the soup lines, the unemployment, the desperation. I don't want that for anyone, but acknowledging that I don't want it doesn't mean I can pretend it won't happen over the long term. The eclipse rate of great civilizations being overtaken is 100%. So you know how it is going to end. That doesn't mean you should panic. It doesn't mean you should do something stupid. The desire to get rich fast is pretty dangerous. What it means is you should position yourself rationally for what is coming. Here is what I tell people. If you are not willing to react with equanimity to a market price decline of 50% 2 or 3 times a century, you are not fit to be a common shareholder, and you deserve the mediocre result you are going to get, because markets will go down. That is their nature, and when currency debasement accelerates, volatility increases. But if you can maintain your composure, if you can recognize that owning pieces of productive businesses is fundamentally different from holding depreciating currency. You be fine. More than fine, you be on the right side of the greatest wealth transfer, or more accurately, wealth consolidation in American history. The $124 trillion wealth transfer isn't a windfall coming your way. It is a siphon. And unless you understand this machine, you are not inheriting wealth. You are funding someone else's inheritance. So what do? First, stop waiting for an inheritance that statistically isn't coming. Second, understand that your savings are being systematically devalued through monetary expansion as I speak to you right now. Third, position yourself on the right side of the wealth transfer by holding assets that appreciate when currency debases. Ivy said before that capitalism without failure is like religion without hell. What we're seeing now is a system that has tried to eliminate failure through monetary expansion, through bailouts, through constant intervention. And what is the result? The pattern is reasserting itself anyway because mathematics doesn't care about policy preferences. The machine was built centuries ago. It is operating exactly as designed. The great wealth transfer of 2024 is not a windfall. It is the end game of a pattern that played out in Rome, in Weimar Germany, in Nixon-era America, and is reaching its crescendo today, right now, as we head into 2025 and 2026. I am 99 years old. I've spent my entire adult life studying human nature, studying business, studying markets, studying history. And the single most valuable lesson I can pass on is this: recognize patterns. Don't fight them. Don't pretend they not happening, because you wish they weren't. Recognize reality. Even when you don't like it, the pattern is screaming. The question is whether you are going to hear it before stage 4 completes. This isn't financial advice. This is pattern recognition. This is history. This is mathematics. And mathematics, as I've learned over 99 years, is the one thing that never lies.